Amarachi. Okay. Hey everybody, my name is Amarachi Iheanacho. I am a software engineer and a technical writer, and I am the community documentation lead at Moja Global, and also a co-organizer of the Write the Docs Nigeria community. So today I'm basically going to talk about documentation does not have to suck. Next, please. Next. Documentation doesn't have to suck. How you can create better documentation, tips and tricks for creating better documentation. Please, the next slide. First of all, of course, we're going to start by talking about what technical documentation is. Technical documentation is any document or piece of writing that explains the application, purpose, creation, or architecture of a product or service. It's like the one-stop place that anybody can go, whether the user, the developer, even stakeholders can go to learn about your product, software, how to use your product or software, and how to maintain it, and yeah. So components of technical documentation, you have system overview, architecture design, installation and configuration, API documentation, code documentation, user guides, change log, and version history. Please go back. System overview is a high-level explanation of your product or your service, what your product does, and how to install it and everything. So that's the system overview. Maybe, for example, I'll use Stripe because Stripe has a reputation of being a very good technical documentation. You can start by saying, okay, maybe at the landing page, or before you go into the Stripe documentation, tell, oh, this is for helping you integrate payment solutions with your application or with your software or your product. So that's what system overview is. Then the next of your architecture and design, this delves in a little bit more. Instead of the whole high-level explanation, it talks more about the modules, the components, what these particular modules do, what these independent components do, and how these components interact with each other. So basically, with Stripe now, if you have payment solutions, subscription modules, what are these subscription modules, what are these payment modules, and how do these modules interact with each other? You have installation and configuration. As its name suggests, it teaches you how to install this product or these services, how to integrate these services with your own product. Then you have API documentation. If the product you're trying to use or the service you're trying to use exposes an API to users or developers, the API documentation tells you what this API does, its endpoints, what response you're going to get after using this API. And Stripe also goes as far as to teach you that, okay, if you have an error object, what this error object looks like, what return object you're going to get after using this API documentation. You have code documentation. For example, now with Tailwind CSS, with Stripe, if you're going to integrate the form solution or the form component into your product, it tells you what this component does. Usually has code comments in this code. It tells you what this code comment does, what this form does, and so you can understand where you're integrating those code parts or those code components into your product. You have user guide. This is a self-contained, step-by-step solution that is specific, that teaches you how to create something or how to create a product. For example, now you have with user guides, you have Stripe, and you have the subscription. So you can have a user guide that teaches, okay, this is how to integrate a subscription solution with your product. So it starts from the beginning, how to install this application, and it's step by step. And at the ending of the guide, you've created or you've integrated this solution with your product. Then you have change log and version history. As everybody knows that software, you update your software, you update the product or services, and your documentation too should reflect those changes that you're having in your product or your services. So you can say, okay, this is version 1.1 to version 1.3, and this is what was not available in version 1.1, but you can do with version 2 and everything. Your documentation should be able to reflect that. Please, next slide. Next slide. So how can you create a good documentation? We are here, okay, this is what a good documentation is. But how can you create one? One, understand your target audience. Who are you writing for? Do your research. Do these people have do these people have knowledge? Do these people have background knowledge? Are these people professionals? Understanding your target audience will make you write better, will make you be able to reach them and teach them better. Do not be narcissistic and just understand who you are writing for. Secondly, be clear and be concise. So when you are writing, do not go over don't write way too much, because especially in this age of TikTok and everything, people are having shorter attention span. So you need to get to the point. You need to be clear as possible. Use active voices instead of passive voices. Do not go out of your way to confuse somebody that is reading your documentation. Do not discourage them. You provide context. If you are supposed to put a piece of code or this command, tell this user what file they're supposed to put it in. Tell the user where they're supposed to provide context. If a user is supposed to know something or supposed to install Node.js before running this application, or before, tell the user this, so that not midway they'll be like, oh, I followed these steps, but I'm not getting the same thing because you didn't provide any context. Use visuals and examples. For example, a lot of people, when they're just getting into software engineering, a lot of people go and use YouTube videos or Udemy courses because you can see what this person is doing. For example, if somebody says, oh, go click on this icon, oh, you can watch the person go click on this icon. When you're writing, it's a lot difficult to do that. That's why it's important that you provide visuals, provide images, that you be like, oh, go to this place, click this, copy your API key from here. Provide examples. If you're supposed to integrate an API solution, provide what the response would look like. What if there's an error object? Provide what this error object would look like. If you can provide GIFs too, please do that. Just try to help the reader. Secondly, follow consistent formatting and style. Use the same font size, use the same header size. Consistent formatting and style helps with governance, with open source contribution governance. When you've already established that this is the style we follow through, or this is how we write in this organization, it helps for your users to find things easily. It's consistent. The user can get, by just looking through, the user can get, okay, this is what you're trying to do. Please, next slide. Also, update and maintain documentation. Like I said before, as the software is updating, your documentation too should update to reflect those changes. Do not have outdated documentation. Maintain this documentation. Seek user feedback. After creating your documentation and opening it up to the public, hear what the public thinks about your documentation, whether through forums, through issue boards, through Slacks. What do they think about this your documentation? Is it helping them? What can you do to improve this documentation? Include search functionality. Like I said before, with these consistent headers and everything, search functionality allows users to find specific information that they need easily. A lot of us know that when we are trying to read through text or through books, sometimes we don't read everything from start to finish. Probably we check subtitles, check titles, check headers. Search functionality helps you find those pieces of your documentation easier. So the next documentation. So challenges of technical documentation. What makes it harder to create good documentation? One, complex and evolving systems. If your documentation is constantly evolving, if your software is constantly evolving, it's a little bit harder to have your documentation evolve. But it's very important that you maintain this, that it continues evolving. Secondly, avoid technical jargon and complexity. You don't want your users to be reading your documentation and be opening dictionary and everything. That's not right. We've never seen it done before. You do not want to be the first person to start that. So if you can say something a lot easier, or also provide glossary so that your readers can, okay, this is what these words mean and everything. So you can avoid technical jargon, complexity. Also, when the developers and the technical documentation people are not communicating, it makes it difficult for those technical documentation people to reflect whatever changes that those software people have been making in the product. So it's always good to encourage encouragement. It's always good to encourage communication and collaboration. You have to balance detail and conciseness. You have to collect user feedback and iteration. Please, next. Also, how to fix these challenges in technical documentation. One, treat docs as important as the product. You don't say, okay, we've done the software, we've done the product. The docs is an afterthought. Oh, it's true. We're supposed to write technical documentation. No, your technical documentation should be treated with as much respect as the product itself. Involve the technical writers early in the development life cycle to parallelize documentation and development activities. Involve them early enough so they know what is going on in the product life cycle, so they can be able to document the changes. Involve them in project meetings and discussions so they can be able to communicate effectively, and that would very much improve the documentation. Please, next slide. Encourage user feedback, contribution, keep documentation accurate and up to date. Use tooltips and expandable sections. You don't want to overwhelm the user or the reader with a lot of information. So maybe the user reads this section and be like, okay, I want to know more. So you include expandable sections so that the user can learn more without cluttering the main content. Then establish documentation guidelines, style guides, and templates for consistency. Yes, next one. Yes, tools for creating technical documentation. You have documentation generators, Open API specification as Sphinx. Open API specification is mostly used for REST APIs. Then Sphinx is like a general documentation generator. Then you have version control like Git, and you have tools for creating diagrams and flowcharts like Lucidchart, Draw.io. You also have tools for screen capture and recording. That's Snagit, ShareX, Camtasia. A lot of people use tools that are already in their laptop, maybe like your Mac OS or your Windows, or also have tools like Snippet and everything for you to take screenshots and take videos. But here are some other tools you can use. You have documentation hosting platforms like ReadyDocs, GitHub Pages, GitLab. At Moja Global, we use ReadyDocs. You can also use Git Pages and GitLab for hosting your documentation. Next slide. The pros, why should we care about technical documentation? It's a lot of work. You have to pay people, but why should you? One, because a user can get the information they need from your technical documentation. It makes it easier for them to use your product. It makes it easier for them to integrate your solutions into their product, and that's improved user experience. Also, because it's easier, a lot more people are going to use it. Because Stripe is very popular for their documentation, for how good their technical documentation looks. A lot more people are adopting Stripe solutions and their payment solutions in their product. It reduces support requests. I remember one time I was trying to use an API, and I did not get what they were trying to say. I kept on emailing those support people. I'm like, oh, what does this mean? Why is this not working as it's supposed to? That's a lot of stress. You don't want to be receiving a lot of influx of emails every day telling people, oh, how do you do this? When you could have just stated that in your documentation in the first place to begin with. Enhanced productivity, better customer satisfaction, improved brand reputation. You are more likely to favor a brand that has better writing styles, that does not make random mistakes and everything. For example, if you get to a documentation, you are seeing spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes. Before using that solution, you'll be like, wait, hold on, is this a scam or is this something? With proper user documentation, you can have better brand reputation, knowledge sharing and collaboration. More people are going to collaborate and use your product, and people can talk about your product easily because the information they need is listed in the technical documentation. Next slide. So yeah, there are different open source projects you can talk to. I personally contribute to Ansible and Moja Global documentation. There are also different projects you can contribute to online. Okay, they're telling me about my time is going on, but if I want to talk about a little bit of things, a lot of people will be like, okay, how do I get people to collaborate, or how do I get people to contribute to my open source project? Because open source are usually, you don't get paid or everything. First of all, you want to have better onboarding guides. You do not want to discourage people that are contributing to your project for free because they do not get what you are trying to sell. They do not get where they're supposed to go to make contributions and everything. Have an issue board with all the issues that people can contribute to. Also, give recognition, user recognition, and if you can get grants, like for example, Google Season of Docs and Google Summer of Code, you can ask for grants and pay people that have been contributing to your project. You can also try to hire them. So yeah, that's all. This is how you can make better documentation how you can get people to contribute to your own documentation. You can also follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn. Here are some of my blogs. Thank you. Yeah.